got rid of the difference between Aboriginality. We're all Australians together. People want action.
We are rich in resources and still in debt.
Because we haven't had politicians with the vision. The resources in this country belong to every Australian.
Who's running the country in terms of the longevity of views, the vision, the policies? Is the bureaucratic class running the country, or is the political class running the country?
We don't get people, politicians anymore, that can think for themselves, will stand up and speak the truth. There should be freedom of religion, and freedom of speech is very important to us, because that's why people fought for us for that freedom of speech.
Nuclear submarines is the next logical step probably to talk about.
We could have actually spent money on defence for missiles and other things that we could spend more money into making sure that we have the defence.
Welcome, Senator Hanson. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for your time today, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation on your short visit to Perth. I want you to give your broader views to start with. Where do you see the top three challenges the country is facing today from an existence and from an sustenance and sustainability in the future?
I suppose the top of the list, they're very close together. Immigration, climate change and the policy they're doing, and the economic stability of the country, where we're headed. So the cost of living is, I suppose, to come into that: immigration, climate change, cost of living.
Oh, do you mind elaborating your views? How do you see the immigration challenge or immigration opportunity, both ways, how it works and it does not work for the broader prosperity of the country?
Australia has been based on the immigrants that we brought out here right from the convict days, that the British settled Australia with the convicts here. Over the period of time, we've had numerous people that have come from all different cultural backgrounds to Australia and called it home and made it their home. The country has grown with that because it's around about 250 years since we've started migration coming here. But at times we have overpopulated ourselves because we haven't had the resources or the infrastructure in place to provide for those people that come here. And that happened in the very first instance when they're bringing up migrants here to try and, grow the food or provide the housing. Now the big problem that I have under the Albanese government is that the influx of migrants they've brought into the country, and between 22 and 23, there are 737,000 migrants. It's unsustainable. So now we're in a situation where Australians can't find housing, rental accommodation, and it's having a huge impact on them. When I speak to people that have to wait 2.5 years for medical attention or operations, or even to see a doctor now, you have to wait 3 weeks or a month to see it. That's not good enough. That's not the Australia that I knew. So my immigration, no problem. But bring in a well-managed way, doesn't affect the lifestyle of the people living here, but also the people that we bring in. I believe that we must bring in the right people who will assimilate, who accept the Australian values and laws of this land, and will see themselves as Australians.
Could you also elaborate your views on looking for economic migrants or skilled migrants to add a bit more story to it? Because, for example, if you have an Australian born here, the state or the government spends a lot of time and money to raise that child to become an adult and then start paying taxes. But when you have a skilled migrant coming over to Australia, who already has a skill, will land here within 3 or 6 months, will find an appropriate job aligned to the skills, and then start paying taxes within 6 months. So that's an economic migrant, but it also gives a short-term economic push to the country that we start getting more taxes at a lower cost to the exchequer. So could you elaborate your views on the skilled migration versus, our own? What's the balance? What's the good balance?
You are right, because the people we bring in, we do need skilled migrants, or people that will bring, prosperity to the country, and having skills, especially skills that we require, is very important. And I think the government has, and of those 737,000 people that we brought to the country, and of course the government was saying we need these people for their skills. Of those 737,000, only 51,605 were skilled migrants. That was a wrong imbalance. So therefore, and of that, And the government was talking about we needed to build housing, we needed skilled migrants to build the housing, tradespeople. And of that, only 1,800 were in the building trade. So that's not relevant to what we need here. So the government brought in these migrants, and a lot of these migrants, what Australians don't want, what I don't want, is people to come here, migrate here, and end up on a welfare system. We're burdened with that. And we can't keep bringing people purely for that, because it was only to prop up the economy of productivity.
Could you talk also on a bit of an economic reform and most recent economic reforms that you think are relevant, and also from a point of view of what are things to be done today from an economic reform point of view, so that the next 10, 20 years, the housing affordability is better, cost of living improves, and how might we achieve a scenario when a single income household could live an average life?
Yeah. Very hard to say how a single income household can live an average life, the cost of living. The trouble is we're being heavily taxed in Australia. We're overtaxed. And government spending is out of control, and there's too much waste of money. The only way a government can actually accumulate money is through business productivity or through taxes. And they haven't looked after the side of it in Australia. When we used to have industries and manufacturing created those jobs, and they're heavy spending what they've done on things that are not relevant to creating more productivity, whereas they have to tax the people. So people are being heavily taxed, whether it's from local government, state, or through the federal. So that's where people are suffering. Cost of living will not be addressed in this country until we look at the main cost, in my opinion, is the push about climate change, is increasing the cost of electricity. Electricity affects everything in our life, whether it's industry, manufacturing, down to the food chains, they're selling it, whether it's the farmer who needs it for irrigation, even the average household. Until we rein in the cost of our electricity, because they're heading down this path of this climate change that we have to have renewables, they are not going to deliver the power, and that's why we've had an increase in power. Deal with the cost of power, you will reduce the cost of living right across the board, and we used to have the cheapest power. Now we've got one of the most expensive powers in the world. And that's why I'm not against renewables. We must have a diversity of power. So whether it comes from renewables, I want to have a discussion about nuclear. We need to look at putting nuclear in. And we also need those coal-fired power stations. We've got the resources here. We need to have gas. That can provide us with the cheap power that we need to drive the country with more prosperity than we are having. So, with housing, what I would do with housing is, and I've been saying this for years, stop foreign ownership of our housing and our agricultural land. We don't need it, and that's driving up the cost of it. A lot of foreigners are banking the money here, buying up housing, leaving it empty, and of course that's driving up the cost. Demand drives cost. So when you've got a shortage of housing, it is. And it's good to see that the Liberals are going to take up my policy on stopping foreign investment, but only for 2 years. But I would go further than that. I'd make it indefinite. And I would also say those foreign investors here that are not Australians owning property here, I'd give them 2 to 3 years to sell their property, otherwise it would be confiscated.
From a point of view of energy, I think you elaborated on the idea of energy mix. To how you're not anti-renewables, you can talk, it should be part of the mix, and everything should be part of the mix. Now, talking about how does the transition happens away from, because we have signed some international treaties, and how do we slowly move away from coal, then to gas, and then to nuclear, and what's the transition path look like for the base load power, and then you have the variable load of power can come from renewable sources. Is that the broader view you have?
I don't know if I got the full gist of your question, what you're asking of me. At the end of the day, we're not obliged to international interest driving our economy. We elect our own members of parliament, and we should be driving our own economy, what is best for this country. And I do not agree with all these international agreements and treaties that we've signed to. I'd get out of the Paris Agreement. We should not be bound to it. when you talk about global emissions, Australia is only responsible for 1% of that. And yet we are trading with countries like China who have 30% plus. And yet they're classified as a third world nation, so that's okay to do it. That's not global working together. That's us destroying our economy for these people that are actually, and I'll tell you what it's about the money. Follow the money, where it goes. International interests, and we're heading down this path of we've got to push renewables, and a lot of people are making a lot of money out of it, and it's destroying our way of life here, and it's destroying people's economic stability in their own homes, and businesses shutting down because they can't afford the power.
You have observed politics and you've been active in politics across the decades. And how are we in this situation that we are rich in resources and still in debt? How can we answer that question that if, as a householder, if your backyard is filled with resources, and how can your generations are in debt?
Because we haven't had politicians with the vision. They haven't known what to do. See, politicians have, I'm here for this period of time, politicians no longer have the vision for the future, leads in the future. It's a short-term vision that they have. So the resources that we have, it's like the gas off the Northwest Shelf. We are one of the biggest exporters of that gas in the world. And yet, we're getting $300 million a year for our gas. Yet Qatar, who is the second highest exporter, in 1 year got $26 billion for their gas. We are fools of what we have done. Politicians say, come on down, invest here. And then in the short term, yes, they create employment, yes, they're doing building here, and then when that's all done, they don't need the workers anymore, but they're ripping the guts out of this country, taking the profits away, they're not paying the right taxes, and we're losing it. The resources in this country belong to every Australian.
Yeah. Every
Australian should be benefiting from that, and that's why I keep pushing about the Northwest Shelf. And because of my push since 2016-17, that I've had changes to the legislation now, that last budget under Labor, apart from that $300 million that we got in corporate tax, we've pulled in $2.4 billion in taxes from that. It can be done, but you've got to keep pushing and driving them. Even, it's the gas that we own, the resources, the iron ore. See, the iron ore and coal, I would not be shipping that overseas. I would use that here to build steel factories. And we should be exporting that. We're not using our resources. We're not value adding anymore.
Lovely. There's a political class, there's a bureaucratic class, and the political class has short-term tenures. The bureaucratic class has a long-term tenure.
Yeah.
Or there is no tenure down there. So how do you see who's running the country in terms of the longevity of views, the vision, the policies, and is the bureaucratic class running the country, or is the political class running the country, or is just we just been in between these two?
My opinion?
Yes, sir.
If it was me, I'd be running the country. But the way it really is, it's the bureaucrats who are running the country. The bureaucrats get themselves into positions, it's very hard for them to lose their positions. And their attitudes, we know more than what the politicians, and most of the time they're right. Because politicians are lazy. Politicians go into the position because they've been picked by the political parties because they're going to be a person who says, yes, okay, no, I agree. We don't get politicians anymore, that can think for themselves, will stand up and speak the truth. They're led by the bureaucrats or their leaders of political parties. They're not representing the people. So the bureaucrats have this opinion, and bureaucrats tell the politicians what to say and do. And I see this all the time, that I speak to the politicians and I speak to the ministers about an issue and they can't really answer me, they don't know it. So they go and listen to the bureaucrats tell them what policies to implement. It's the Treasury, it's the bureaucrats that are actually giving directions of where they should go. And until we get people from backgrounds and politicians that really are here for the best interests of the country and the people and have an understanding to bring in policies that is going to benefit us. How many politicians do you know have ever run their own business, employed staff, have actually, done well in their own life? And these people who can actually decipher. See, to be a politician, you have to be a problem solver. And that's important to me. So my attitude is, very few politicians will think and can come up with solutions, and most of them are led by the bureaucrats because they lack self-confidence or knowledge in how to deal with an issue.
Do you think, is there an opportunity and a short-term solution or short-term opportunity to have tenure for the bureaucratic class so that people don't become power centers in different departments? Is there an opportunity to solve in the short term?
I think that's very important. Yes, I do. And but in saying that, you don't want to lose that expertise, that knowledge and experience as well. So that's very important to maintain that. You don't move someone on just because they're outside their tenure. But I think that, I don't believe in what we've got. Where we've got is it's come down to jobs for the boys. And because of bureaucrats, we've actually kept these people in places they shouldn't be there. We've been becoming over-governed. We're putting too many people in that we don't need that. And because we've lost the work ethic as well. So we've become very top-heavy and keep putting people in these positions that we don't need.
We have from a broader point of view, we have a welfare state and we have economic states, which is the economic engine of the country, which produces income, and the welfare state, which consumes, and we have to support our vulnerable. And how might we connect these two states together, that if we say that, okay, if we don't make more money, we will not spend that much money that year? How might we think about indexing the welfare state? Because within the welfare state, there are different vulnerable groups like elderly Australians, like Australians with disabilities, Australians with mental health issues, are different demographics within the welfare state who are supported through the taxpayer. So, and from a political class and the bureaucratic class, we take a decision, the classes take a decision that which demographic group is more important than the other one. So we are segregating people based on the problem they have, like systemic segregation, not on class or color or creed, but what problem you have, what kind of a problem you are associating with. And hence, this group will get more money per capita versus that group. So we are segregating between multiple Australians. So we are putting Aussies against Aussies, that group of Aussies will get more money or less money. So what's the rationale of doing that from a political point of view or a bureaucratic point of view? And if there is no, and what's the solution around that?
It is. Our budget is around about $260 billion a year that we spend on just our welfare alone. We've got about 900,000 people that are on the welfare benefits. We've got fourth generation who are on a welfare. I know one family, I've heard of it through the minister, and said the family were on welfare. The son went out and got a job. He got abused by the father when he came home to say, I've got a job. So it was the mentality. Welfare was set up as a helping hand, not a way of life. And it's become that with a lot of Australians, that they are there ready to take the hand out as if it's their right. It's not their right, it's a privilege paid for by the taxpayers to give you a helping hand. So we've got to get rid of that mentality when we have people on welfare for 10, 20, 30 years, when jobs are going in Australia. So that needs to be addressed. How I would address it? You can only receive welfare 2 out of 5 years. Unless you've got a health issue, unless you're aged, or there's a real reason why you shouldn't be working, everyone should make an effort to pay their way when they're capable of working. We look after our aged people by all means. We must ensure that they are looked after. They've paid their taxes, they've worked for this country, and so we must look after them. The other big factor that's costing us is also the NDIS. That's out of control and it's unsustainable the way we're doing it. And there's not equality. When NDIS was brought before me, it was supposed to be for those people with the harsh disabilities that the parents are worried about when they were gone, who was going to look after their children. And the way it's been programmed now It's unsustainable. Everyone thinks they should be on it. 660,000 people are on NDIS, and at the moment it's costing us about $45 billion a year. And by 2030 it's going to be costing about $90 to $100 billion. Unsustainable. So tough decisions must be made, and we need to rein that in if we are actually going to, because if you look at $260 billion a year, that's not with NDIS, that's just welfare. And then all these other costs. We either have to tax the Australian people more, or we cut back our spending, and something's got to give, because you cannot maintain a standard of living in Australia if we keep going the way we're going.
Lovely. Could you talk more on your understanding on the classical four freedoms and how it live in this current context of where we are from the political landscape?
What
the four freedoms: the freedoms from want, freedom from fear, freedom of religion.
Oh, freedom
speech.
of religion, yes it is. And of course that's in our constitution, section 116 of the Australian Constitution, is that government should not impose religion on any aspect of it, and which is, I totally agree with. And it should be freedom of religion, freedom of what you believe in, as long as it does not impact on anyone else in the country, right? That is something that people should do in their own home, in their own communities. I have no problem with that. But when it has, if anyone's freedom of religion, or that religion, is a political ideology that will impact on the Australian way of life and culture and take away people's rights to many things, I have a problem with that. And other than that, there should be freedom of religion. And freedom of speech is very important to us, because that's why people fought for us for that freedom of speech. That's why they fought against Germany. That's why they fought against, Japan, the wars that we've had. The men and women sacrificed their lives for our freedom. And freedom of democracy, freedom for us to vote for who we want to represent us in Parliament. And I'm defending my right to freedom of speech at the moment through the court system. And it's not just about Pauline Hanson, because I need to win this case for every Australian out there to have that freedom of speech, freedom of opinion. It's very important to all us. These are very important to me, but they're things that aren't taken for granted and shouldn't be. And that's the problem with a lot of Australians. They don't understand how special we have it in this country, because they've never travelled and gone to other countries, that the people are controlled by dictatorship. They don't have that freedom of speech. They have nothing like that. That's why I fight so strongly for it.
Thank you. From a point of view of the geopolitical where we are, we don't have any physical borders. We have sea at the outside. From a border point of view, but there are so much happening in the geography where we live in. Do you think we are, from a capability point of view and a defense capability point of view, we are a sovereign nation to defend ourselves in a scenario where we are impeding, or there is a possibility of wars happening?
We are a sovereign nation. Have we got the capability of defending ourselves? No. If anyone wanted to really attack us and take over, they'd take us over within 48 hours, 72 hours. We'd be gone, finished. The only one that's stopping this from happening is our ally America, or possibly Great Britain and New Zealand. We haven't got no way of defending ourselves. We've got one submarine that's actually working out of 6. They've cut back on our defence spending. We don't, even the military we don't have enough in the military, we don't have enough in reservists, we don't train the people. Our defence has become a joke. I've done 5 parliamentary defence programs. I've been over to Afghanistan, I've been on the submarines, I've done border patrol, I've been to the army, I've been to the Air Force. We have a lot of proud people who will fight to the death for this country. But it's our bureaucrats and our politicians that have not put in place to ensure that we are a strong nation, that we will be able to defend ourselves. And yes, I have grave concerns from people from the north who are looking at Australia, because you've got overpopulation that's happening in these countries. You've got dictatorships that want to actually control the world. You have got our resources here, that there is going to be a battleground in the future because of the resources that we have. These people want. I have fear for the future of a nation. Will we have the freedom that we have these days in 50 years down the track? Maybe sooner? I don't believe we will.
The assumption there is we can defend ourselves as our friends in US, Great Britain and New Zealand.
Yes.
So that's the assumption there.
Well, that's why we've got these allies, and allies with India and also with Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we've formed this alliance with like-minded people in the Western world, and we need those alliances.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Could you talk more on from a point of view, because the next conversation on defense is the nuclear submarines, which we have on the pathway. Do you think there is, if we start creating that skill set within Australians, we don't want foreigners running our subs, and we don't want foreign workers working within the defense services. Do you think is the logical progression having nuclear energy first, and then we talk about nuclear submarines? Is the next logical step probably to talk about are we capable enough to have nuclear deterrence from a point of view of, if there is a possibility of threat of war, do we have a nuclear deterrence in our own country?
Do we have
nuclear power weapons? Are we there to have that discussion?
Do I think we should have nuclear weapons? No, that concerns me greatly. Mm-hmm. All right. Nuclear weapons to me are the last resort, and I know there are, America has it, and Russia has it, and China has it, and these other countries do have it. Everyone's pointing their nuclear weapons at each other. The fear that's going on there, and you only need one dictator that's actually also can press the button, and we've, just blow the whole world up. And I don't believe in putting that power into too many hands that they actually have it. Mm-hmm. It's a hard one to say with it, mm-hmm. and you talk about building the subs here and nuclear subs and everything like that. I'm for the nuclear subs, I've supported that. But we could have actually gone and bought other subs and to provide for us. Nuclear subs aren't going to come in mm-hmm. till the end of the 30s, 40s mm-hmm. before we actually have it. What have we got now? Actually nothing. We could have actually spent money on defence for missiles and other things that we could spend more money into making sure that we have the defence. And this is why America's fed up with it, because they're the ones that are arming themselves and making sure they're at the ready to protect other countries like ourselves, when it should have been our responsibility to ensure we have enough to defend our own nation. Yes, we need a helping hand, but we should have taken on that responsibility more than what we have done.
Okay. There's an upcoming state election in WA in March coming year. What's the political program you're taking to the electorate? What's the policy platform you're presenting to the electorate of Western Australia?
Well, it's very hard to ask me that question. I am the national leader, but I don't really get involved in the state politics mm-hmm. because I've got the people who live here. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that should be putting the policies forward. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that should be talking to the people. Mm-hmm. They are the ones that should know what the state needs. Mm-hmm. But just in general, what I'm hearing from people, mm-hmm. cost of living, cost of electricity. They're fed up with local government councils as well, because they're become little dictators in what they're controlling the people. Health issues, ambulance ramping, these are things. Division that's happening between Aboriginals and non-Aboriginals, in Indigenous here in the state as well. To get development or anything happening, you've got to get permission or you've got to pay all this money. Get rid of, the difference between Aboriginal. We're all Australians together, and this is, these are just things that I've heard from mm-hmm. the people in Western Australia since I've been here, and I probably think they're about the main things mm-hmm. overall. And
from a federal election point of view, what are the biggest things you think or themes the election will be run under? And you have a few candidates for the federal seats.
Immigration is the biggest thing,
uh-huh.
And the cost of living.
Uh-huh.
And the housing issue as well. Albanese's housing has not worked, putting that $10 billion in, mm-hmm. and so far it's been out there about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. The money they made from it, $35 million, has gone into, mm-hmm. Into administration. Mm-hmm. And the money's, People are sick and tired of the promises and the same old rhetoric. People want action. And that's what they're calling for. And what's important to people out there, they're not happy with this misinformation, disinformation bill, shutting down their freedom of speech. You know, people have suffered out under COVID and controlled by the bureaucrats and the governments, that's what I'm saying, that they were told they must and they were forced to have this. It's impacted our country and the people out there, not only losing their jobs, losing their expertise, losing businesses, losing, you know, that knowledge, but their health is deteriorating as well from those people who are forced to have that jab.
My concluding question, I want to get your views on your political role models you have seen and observed across your life, and who you think are the, you know, had good, stronger values or aligned with yourself, or who do you believe and trust?
Political values of someone that I admire for their political values is I look for strong leadership. And people that have actually pushed against all adversity to work for the people, to acknowledge and respect your position that you have, that you must, you know, fight for that. And there's a few. I go right back to Abraham Lincoln. I actually have a lot of respect for that man. The adversity that he went through at the time of the Civil War, he was just from an ordinary background. I think his parents were farmers. So when he was into the spotlight to be president, the decisions that he had to make in a time of war in his state, and he was the one who brought in the 13th Amendment, that was against a lot of people, that was to get rid of slavery. So I admire him. I admire Winston Churchill for what he did. He took over the leadership from Neville Chamberlain. They didn't want him, but he was the one that knew that he had to take it up to Hitler. They thought they could all appease Hitler, Neville Chamberlain, the whole lot of them, and there wouldn't be war. Winston Churchill knew that you could not appease someone like Adolf Hitler, and he had his agenda. And when he took over the leadership, he showed that true leadership and he brought Britain through it. Margaret Thatcher is another one. I have a lot of admiration for that woman because they ridiculed her and they didn't think she had it because female. And that was going back to the 1980s. But she stood her ground on many things with the working class, with also the coal miners, and also with education. So she was a leader in many aspects and areas too. Here in Australia, who do I really admire? It's really hard that I see that true strong leadership. I see people that are driven by the polls, how the voting's going. Do I see that strong leadership? I don't. I suppose one person that I have admired over the years is Bronwyn Bishop, and I saw her as a strong leader. John Howard came across as a strong leader, but a lot of his policies, he started all this climate change. John Howard separated water from land. That's why the cost of water these days, and a lot of it's in foreign ownership. So there's things that John Howard's done that I'm not happy with, but he was a man of conviction. He was a man who made his decisions, by all means, but I really... I don't know. I don't have a lot of time or respect for most of the politicians, actually, to tell you the truth.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.